following presentation is a Delmarva Studios production.
Welcome back, Truth Seekers, to another edition of the Flat Earth Files. I'm your host, as always, George. I hope you had a really nice weekend. I hope you were able to spend some time with your family and friends, a little downtime. As we're really hitting full-fledged winter here in the Mid-Atlantic region, we enjoyed some mild weather earlier in this month, but we're getting some pretty cold weather. We've had a few single-digit nights. Hope you guys are well in your neck of the woods. Today we're going to be talking about the history of the flat earth. There's a lot of people out there. If you go to Google or DuckDuckGo and you put in the history of the flat earth, you're going to get a lot of stories that say that the CIA, came up with this program in 2014 and it's used to discredit truthers. And anytime I would do a podcast on flat earth on my other podcast, I'd get emails all the time saying I was discrediting my word. And the fact of the matter is, just the very fact of the matter is, the flat earth theory is nothing new. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on this program before, very popular book, 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a globe, that was written by William Carpenter way back in 1885. There have been people who have been questioning heliocentrism since its inception in the 16th century. It's just the official narrative is the only thing that changed. There's always truthers out there, and this is not some CIA op to discredit truthers. It's simply not the case. By the way, you can get the book for $6.97, and if you're a Prime member, you can get it shipped to your home under $7. And listen, if you're Kindle, if you're an electronic reader, you can get it for 99 cents. I personally, I always buy the physical books because I know it's only a matter of time before things like Behold a Pale Horse and Manly P. Hall's books and things like this are going to get erased digitally. So it's very important to me. I always purchase physical copies of books. However, I'll put the link to Amazon if you want it on Kindle or in paperback. I think you should really take a moment and read it. It's an easy read. Almost 500 4.5-star ratings. It's one of those books I like to keep out on the coffee table. Listen, we don't hide our thoughts here at our house. We don't. We actually have a flat Earth model picture in our living room. It's not like blasted in the middle above the sofa, but it's kind of off in a corner. It's there for people to see, to look at, and I think it's important to have these conversations. Most of the time, people may give you that look. Oh, this guy must be nuts. But really, I think there's more people who are starting to question everything, specifically after the last few years. And we discussed that with Sean. I believe that was last week. It's important to question everything. And it's obvious. I'm shocked at how many downloads this podcast has had. We've only been going for 6 weeks. So it's quite obvious to me that there are a lot more people who are interested in this subject than that are really willing and open to come out and talk about it. Which, listen, I'm glad. But at some point, we have to shatter that glass, break that glass ceiling, as old Hillary would say, right? A break through the firmament. But no, it's important to have and question everything. Because again, if you believe we never went to the moon, that's great, man's greatest accomplishment. It is important that we have these conversations. Now, before we get into today's podcast, which is going to be a 2 or 3 part series because it's a lot of read. Back in July 2018, Eric Dubay wrote The History of the Flat Earth. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but it's an extremely long read. I'm pressed for time tonight. We've had just a really busy day, and I have a lot more things to do tomorrow, but I wanted to reach out and drop a little something for your Tuesday, and we'll do a couple more later this week to complete. Again, this will be a 2 or 3 part series, The History of the Flat Earth. But I did want to share a couple emails with you. Our first email He introduces himself and he says he's listening to the podcast as he's typing the email. Loves the name we came up with, the Flat Earth Files. It's simple and clean. And he's a 33-year-old guy, and he's been actively looking for Flat Earth content the past 6 or 7 months. And he saw my podcast pop up when you were on the second episode, and he's been hooked ever since. And he has since looked into the other podcast, The Fact Hunter, and he enjoys that as well. And he says he would like to chat sometime. And again, folks, you can email us here at theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. If you want to connect with me on Skype, that's the other easy way. It's george.hobbs5, george.hobbs and the number 5. And just send me a wave. I'll wave back and we can connect. We can chat. I would really love to have the chats online for people to hear, the discussions for people to hear. But, I try to reach back to everybody. I truly do. He says he just wants to give me a huge shout out. He enjoys the content and hopes that we gather millions of followers. That'd be awesome. And says, take care and stay strong. So appreciate that. We have another email. Very interesting email, very thoughtful and thought-provoking. He says he's listening to the podcast on Spreaker, by the way. I appreciate that. That's our home base. Whenever we go live or send it out, it goes on Spreaker, but then Spreaker takes it and distributes it to Spotify, Amazon, wherever you're listening to it. And he says he's just at episode 5, and he will listen on, but he wanted to write. He talks about there are a lot of aspects that resonates with him, the various projects, which Overcast and Paperclip and many others, in which we brought these German scientists, etc., over to the United States from Germany. He says the fact that Antarctica and the Arctic are kept taboo is a big one. That's a very big one that resonates with me as well, particularly since I believe the proper model is that we are in a big lake and Antarctica is the wall that holds in all the water. And somebody had mentioned maybe that is actually, and I'll have to do a podcast on this later on, they say the ice walls moving back and forth may be very well how we get the tides. That's obviously you can't sum it up in 30 seconds, but that's something we'll get into down the road. He also says that Elon Musk is a puppet. Absolutely, Elon Musk is simply a puppet on the world stage. And that evolution is BS. Couldn't agree more. I mean, if evolution was a thing, wouldn't we still be evolving? Wouldn't we be something else? Why would we just stop at mankind? And the Nazis and their technology and where they eventually go, the moon crap, and the fake aliens and many more. He agrees on many of that. Even the divide and conquer among truthers, quite sad. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's one thing, I don't know if I've mentioned on this particular podcast, but I certainly mentioned it on my other podcast all the time. You'll never hear me talk bad about other truthers. I think everybody is smart enough to figure out whether they trust someone or they don't trust someone. I'm not going to come on here and then spend an entire 60 minutes on this guy is government controlled, because you don't know. You just don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I was always a fan of Bill Cooper. Bill said, listen to everyone and discern for yourself. So you too. I go through all kinds of content. And if I find it interesting, I share it with you. And at the end of the day, it's up to you to do with that information what you will. I don't want you to believe everything I say. What is most important to me out of everything I do, whether it's this podcast or the Fact Hunter, whatever it may be, I just want people to question the official narrative, because I've proven, going all the way back to the Civil War, the Spanish War, the Spanish flu, which was neither Spanish or a flu, everything has been a lie, and it's been a power play to get the elite further away from the average guy. Again, I've given numbers out before that over the last 100 years, the average guy's money hasn't really increased. But the top 1% of the 1%, their net worth has gone up 300-fold, especially over the last couple years. They continue to get richer, and we continue to struggle, especially with this hyperinflation and everything else that's going on. But I digress. Pardon me. He said, I got in touch with Patrick Kelly before he disappeared, actually right before, but I don't know anything about what actually happened. Nothing good, I'm afraid. And we were discussing about energy, another very, very, very important subject. And I'm here to tell you, this is me talking now, I'm here to tell you I couldn't agree more with the emailer that this is a very, very important issue that I have discussed on my other podcast ad nauseum, especially with Tesla, Nikola Tesla. He had free energy, just like Stanley Meyer, the guy who invented, an engine that could run on water. They killed him because you can't charge for something free. And I argue that the elites don't care about money. They have it all. Understand fiat currency, they can print all they want. Okay? They want us in debt. They want us to continually have to pay property taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, our electric bill, our water bill, food prices. So we have to continue to work, so we don't take time to gather amongst ourselves and have these types of conversations that we're having right now. So we can't. There's I don't remember if it was a Bug's Life. I think it was a Bug's Life when Kevin Spacey's character was talking about if the 99% ever catch on to what we're doing. And that's what all this is about in life. Republicans and Democrats, it's meant to divide us, and very much in the truth community as well. We're so quick to pick a team. Whenever there's something in the news, you're either for that guy or against the guy, and it divides us. We need to take the time, put all that silly stuff behind us, and come together and take back what is ours, and that's natural law. Okay? Let's get back to the email. But again, that is a very, very important subject, energy. He says he was also for the flat earth and very much a Bible guy. He says he remembers complaining about the lack of Saturday services instead of Sunday. And I, too, am a guy who recognizes Saturday as the Sabbath. That's just me. And if you go back to Constantine around 322, 323, he was trying to appease the pagans and the Christians, and he kind of brought them together. And that's when there's a very good Prophecy Club episode where the guy talks about the paganism of Christian holidays. If you're interested in that, email me, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. I don't think it's a good episode to play on the Flat Earth Files, but if you're interested, I'll send you the link. It's very, very intriguing. The emailer says he was raised in Catholic land and worked for the church for many years, but has some major doubts about the current version of the Bible, the translations, the origins and revisions of the accepted version. How far could it have gone? How far modified from the alleged originals? That is one point. And that's, listen, we have to, we say we question everything. And I've always found it interesting, like who decided what went into the Bible, what didn't. Obviously, we know King James, a lot of that. Then the Dead Sea Scrolls, was that legit? Was that not legit? Then you got the Book of Enoch. Again, so much to discern. Then he says, the second point, the main one, is the flat earth itself. He says he has no reason to support the ball theory, just to be clear, but rationally, most of the points trying to disprove it are childish reasoning. If we can see in a line despite the surface being convex, that is one of the few things that I might buy into. Assuming there is no optical deflection or curvature of some reason, one could take a strong laser or something and see how it goes with the flat water surface, which, by the way, has been done. And it's, I got to go back and find it on YouTube. But I think it was from the movie Level, which was released last year, and they're bringing out part 2 in April, Level Up Part 2. They did a laser experiment. And for the most part, it worked, and it was over quite a long distance. So that has been done. And it did go before the calculated limits. He goes on to say, and yes, the Antarctica, the explorers, the problems with the length of the equator in respect of going diagonally across could be God points. But if you spin a ball, the water should splash away. They're ridiculous. If there's a center of gravity, Again, he says, if I'm not blindly supporting the theory, just open discussion, the water would be kept where it is by the gravity and would not go anywhere. Again, I don't believe in gravity. I think that's scientism because I don't believe the earth is spinning. And that is their theory for proving gravity. But I respect this gentleman's email. I respect everybody's. You'll never hear me talk bad about anybody. We're all we're theorizing. We're having a conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to send this email very much. He says the water would be kept where it is again by the gravity, would not go anywhere due to the dimensions could be comparable to a plan, exactly as a curve can become almost like a straight line if the curve is big enough, or a theological one. Goes on to say it's not because one writes it is common sense or everyone knows that or God did it. He says that's how deceivers will talk. He says I find many points really not convincing at all because the truth should be straight, simple, clear. And that is the reason, emailer, why we do this program, because we are lied to about everything. And on my other podcast, I have proven time and time again that we are lied to about everything. We are lied into war. They lie and send their own citizens to death in other countries and do ungodly things to those other nations. So to think that they're being honest about heliocentrism, to me, I don't buy it for a second. Says Christ and the early way could be the point. The truth is scary for them. They crap in their pants instantly as soon as they smell it. And that's something I couldn't agree more with. And I emailed him back and I said that they are afraid of the truth and they lie constantly, on and on and on. He says he's very open and listening. He hopes to get to more good points, I should say. And there are many good ones already. He's very pleased and sending good thoughts and compliments for the job. And it was a very good email, very thoughtful email. And I really appreciate it. Some very good points. And again, when I'm reading these, I personally don't agree with every one of the points as well. I'll say I don't agree with a lot of truthers out there on certain points, but I'm still going to listen. And more importantly, I want to put them out there because it may resonate with someone else. But again, a very good email, and I've already written him back, and hopefully I did a better job explaining it via this podcast than I did in my email. Sometimes, wording is a lot harder than actually just sitting in front of a microphone, reading it, and kind of reacting to it that way. So thank you both for the emails. We have another emailer who we're hoping to get on the program next week. And then, of course, we have another listener on February the 8th scheduled to have a conversation with, and we'd love to have you on. Please send us an email, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. We're going to go ahead and move along to this story, The History of Flat Earth by Eric Dubay. Again, it'll probably be a 2 or 3 part series. I just don't have a lot of time this evening, but I wanted to address the emails and get this information out to you. It says, from the beginning of recorded history and for thousands upon thousands of years, cultures across the entire world all believed the earth was flat. Their various cosmologies and cosmogonies differed in slight ways, but their overall geographies and astronomies were incredibly consistent and, in fact, virtually identical. The Earth was a stationary plane void of any motion or curvature, flat across its entire expanse, except, of course, for hills, mountains, and valleys. The North Pole was the magnetic monopole center point of the flat Earth, with Polaris, the North Pole star, situated directly above. Polaris was the only motionless star in the heavens, with all the other constellations revolving perfect circles over the Earth every night. The stars were divided into 2 categories known as the fixed stars and the wandering stars. The fixed stars were so called because they were observed then as we can observe today, to stay fixed in their constellation patterns night after night and year after year, even century after century, never changing their relative positions. The wandering stars, what are today referred to as planets, were so called because they were observed then as we observe today, to wander the heavens, taking their own unique spirograph-like patterns, making both forward and retrograde motions over and around the earth during their cycles. The sun and moon were both of equal size, and they too revolved over and around the motionless earth, as immortalized in the Chinese yin-yang symbol. The sun and moon were much closer to the earth than supposed nowadays, and each shined with their own unique opposite lights. The sun's being warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, and the moon's light being cold, silver, damp, putrefying, and septic. The sun and moon, as though connected to a magnet maypole, made alternating spiral journeys over and around the earth every year. The sun began its journey at the Tropic of Capricorn at the winter solstice, where it made its fastest and largest circle over the earth. For the next 3 months, every day, the sun slightly narrowed its path and slowed its speed until by the spring equinox, the sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Capricorn to the equator. Then for the next 3 months again every day, the sun continued to slightly narrow its path and slow its speed until the summer solstice, when the sun made its smallest, slowest circle around the Tropic of Cancer. Once the sun reached this innermost circle, like the ribbons and dancers around the maypole, the sun would then begin its opposing, widening, and quickening journey back to the Tropic of Capricorn. For the next 3 months, every day, the sun slightly widened its path and hastened its speed until the autumnal equinox, the sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Cancer back to the equator. Then for the next 3 months again, every day, the sun would continue to slightly widen its path and hasten its way back until the winter solstice, when the sun made its largest and fastest circle around the Tropic of Capricorn, and then the annual journey would begin again. And we'll talk about the moon. The moon had a similar yearly path revolving over and around the earth, but unlike the sun, which constantly changed its speed to keep a consistent 24-hour day, the moon's speed never changed, so depending on its latitude, the moon was observed then, as we can observe today, to take approximately 24.7 to 25 hours per cycle. So this is why at different times and places during each month, we can see the moon in the morning, in the afternoon, or at night. This is also the origin of old fairy tales such as the hare and the hedgehog, or the tortoise and the hare, right? The hare, like the sun, begins the annual race full of energy, excitement, and ego, declaring himself the definite winner, and gets off to an immediate head start. Meanwhile, equally confident in his seemingly lesser abilities, the humble, slow and steady tortoise moon begins as well, allowing the hare to lead. And as the race carries on, the cocky hare tires and slows down or takes a nap, at which point the tortoise overtakes him. This analog to the moon reaching the Tropic of Cancer before the sun each year and beginning its return journey. When the hare reaches this halfway point of the race, he realizes his lackluster attitude has resulted in being taken over by the slower tortoise, and again picks up speed. Then for the remainder of the race, the sun picks up speed day by day, gaining momentum on the moon, but ultimately losing as the slow and steady tortoise reaches the finish line before the hare wins. So for ancient man, Earth and Polaris were the two immovable center points of the universe around the sun, moon, and all other stars revolved in a dome-like shape. Some cultures believed in a literal, physical solid dome or firmament to which the fixed stars were bound. Other cultures mythologized that the axis mundi as the world tree with Polaris at the center and all other constellations forming the branches. So in these flat Earth depictions, the North Pole occupied the center point, and south was all straight lines extending outward from there. So understand that east and west were not straight lines as assumed nowadays, but they were in fact circles, just like all lines of latitudes and the paths of the celestial bodies. The southern circumference of Earth was surrounded by a gigantic wall of ice, 150 to 200 feet above sea level, that was holding the interconnected oceans in like a World Cup, for lack of better words. Beyond the ice wall, there were some cultures that believed that a firm barrier existed through which no human could penetrate, right? The firmament. Other cultures believed that there were entire worlds and other civilizations that existed beyond the Antarctic ice, the outer space, if you will. And if you talk about extra territory, maybe that's where the extra terra, meaning land, terrestrials come from. Not outer space as depicted in the movies, but maybe outside the ice wall. Currently, for the past half century, there has existed an international Antarctic treaty, again, that prevents all independent exploration of Antarctica. Pre-approved guided tours exist, which take visitors to a few coastal regions of Antarctica, but no independent exploration of the continent is allowed. Sailors like Jarl Anderhoy have been caught attempting to explore Antarctica and threatened, turned around at gunpoint, fined, and even jailed for violating this militarily enforced international treaty. As a result, the public currently has no way to confirm or deny the seemingly fantastical claims of ancient men concerning what may or may not exist at the southernmost extremities of the Earth. We can, however, confirm that this 200-foot ice wall surrounding the southern circumference of Earth most certainly exists. We can confirm that Polaris is indeed the only non-moving star in the sky. By the way, if you're not familiar with the Georgia Guidestones, which were destroyed on July 6, 2021, which just happens to be George Bush's birthday, his 74th or 76th birthday. There was a hole in the Georgia Guidestones where you could peek through every single night and Polaris would be right there, which proved, I think the Georgia Guidestones were open to the public on 3/22, March 22nd of all days. Skull and Bones is number 322, either 1980 or 1981, and they stood there for 40 years. And for 40 years, you could peek through that little tiny hole at the Georgia Guidestones, and Polaris would be right there, proving that indeed it was a fixed star. And all the fixed stars indeed rotate perfect circles around Polaris while remaining stuck in their relative constellations night after night, year after year, and again, century after century. The wandering stars or planets do indeed wander the heavens, taking their own unique spirograph-like paths, as we mentioned. And the sun and moon are indeed observably of equal size and revolve over us in daily cycles. And just as the ancients observed, the sun's annual path does indeed travel from the Tropic of Capricorn at the winter solstice to the equator at spring equinox, and to the Tropic of Cancer at the summer solstice, and back to the equator at the autumnal equinox. And then, of course, finally, back to the Tropic of Cancer. The sun's light is indeed warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic. And while the moon's light is indeed cold, silver, damp, and septic. A thermometer placed in the sun's light will always read warmer than a thermometer placed in the sun's shade. Okay? Listen to this. While a thermometer placed in the moon's light will always read cooler than a thermometer placed in the moon's shade. And that is one of the theses as we get back to our emails, the free energy stuff. The sun is a positive energy. The moon is like a negative energy. And again, Nikola Tesla was onto something there. Plant and animal substances exposed to sunlight quickly dry, shrink, coagulate, and lose their tendency to decompose and putrefy. Whereas plant and animal substances exposed to moonlight will quickly show symptoms of putrefaction and decay. Last but not least, just as the ancients espoused, the earth is observably motionless to all our senses, and the horizon remains perfectly flat as far as the eye can see. Not only does the horizon remain perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer, but whether at sea level, the top of Mount Everest, or even 35,000 feet high in an airplane, or even 100 and some thousand feet on the Red Bull Express with that guy who jumped in, was it Arizona, which is really the highest any amateur hot air balloon has ever flown, the flat horizon actually rises to eye level of the observer all the way up. So on a globe Earth, no matter how large it is assumed to be, the horizon would remain where it was, and the rising observer would have to tilt his head downwards further and further the higher they rose to see the steadily falling horizon. Interesting thought. Many people will be shocked to know that to this day, every single scientific experiment ever devised to show the alleged motion of Earth has failed to do so, or even has given the evidence of the opposite, that the Earth is indeed motionless. And we mentioned that, I think, 2 episodes ago. We listed many of the experiments that didn't work out. And every attempt ever made to measure the alleged curvature of the Earth has failed to do so. So the first person, again, in recorded history to ever claim the Earth was anything but flat was Greek mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras. And this was around 500 BC. And again, interestingly enough, Pythagoras has also been touted by Freemasonic historians such as Albert Mackey, James Anderson, William Hutchison, and William Preston as being the very first Freemason. Presented more as a thought experiment than a complete cosmology, Pythagoras posited that if the Earth were a spherical globe turning on its vertical axis once per day, while revolving annually around a stationary sun, that this model could also equally explain the cyclical motions of the heavenly bodies. This heliocentric model was taught to initiates at Pythagoras' Crotona school, but never became popular or had an influence outside of Greece for another 2,000 years. A century later, another Greek mathematician and philosopher named Plato also espoused a spherical Earth cosmology, except he claimed the Earth globe to be the motionless center of the universe with the sun, moon, and stars revolving around. His most famous student, Aristotle, also wrote about this geocentric globe Earth cosmology in his book, quote, On the Heavens, offering 3 main points of evidence for his theory. First, Aristotle noted that when sailing away from an observer on shore, ships approaching the horizon disappeared from view before masthead, and he postulated that this occurrence was due to the curvature of the Earth. But again, the P900, the P1000, we can see too far. We pull them back in. If that was the case, we shouldn't be able to pull these things back in. My opinion. Aristotle argued that the hull disappeared first because beyond the horizon, the globe Earth curved downwards, causing the hull and eventually the masthead and entire ship to drop below the curvature. And again, today we can easily prove that Aristotle was incorrect in his assumption by using telescopes, binoculars, and zoom cameras. Once a ship has completely disappeared beyond the horizon, modern technology allows us to zoom in and bring the entire vessel, hull and all, back into full view. This proves that ships do not disappear hull first due to the alleged curvature, and that the horizon line is in fact merely the vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view, and not, as Aristotle supposed, the beginning of the Earth's curvature. The horizon is subjective and varies in distance depending on the weather, the observer's height, and the strength of his eyesight or instruments. As noted previously, the horizon actually rises to the eye of the observer no matter how high he climbs, which also proves that the horizon line is not some objective point of curvature on a convex Earth, but rather the subjective vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view. Aristotle's second point of evidence offered his spherical Earth theory was the Earth's round shadow cast on the moon during lunar eclipses. To this day, heliocentrists still offer this argument as proof of a spherical Earth, claiming that during lunar eclipses, the sun, Earth, and moon all align in a perfect 180-degree, like 3 billiard balls, causing the sun to cast the Earth's shadow onto the moon. This is interesting. This clever but faulty assumption is rendered completely invalid, however, due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the sun and the moon are still visible together above the horizon. As early as the time of Pliny the Elder, there are records of eclipses happening while both the sun and moon were visible in the sky, and continue to be recorded by the Royal Astronomical Society today. Obviously, if the sun and the moon are both observable simultaneously during an eclipse, then it's impossible for them to be aligned in this 180-degree, 3 billiard balls in a row. And it's therefore impossible that the sun could be casting the Earth's shadow on the moon. So another explanation must be sought. Another explanation, in fact, already existed in many cultures around the world, who posited that a third celestial body known as Rahu, or the black sun, also existed equal to size to the sun and the moon. This translucent dark body passed in front of the sun and the moon during solar and lunar eclipses, causing their lights to dim. We'll wrap up this last point, and we'll continue on later this week. Aristotle's final point offered for his spherical Earth theory was the appearance of Polaris and other stars to gradually decline overhead as an observer travels southwards. He argued that the gradual declination and eventual disappearance beyond the horizon of certain stars and constellations as one traveled southwards was evidence to the observer was traveling over a convex curved surface. Similar to the ships disappearing over the horizon argument, Aristotle posited that the horizon line was the literal curvature of his spherical Earth, and the stars which declined and disappeared beyond it became invisible because a mass of curved Earth existed between them and the observer. In actual fact, however, the gradual declination of objects in the sky towards the horizon is merely a product of the law of perspective on plane surfaces. As any art student of point perspective knows, the human eye views the world in a pyramidal shape, so that when looking down on a long hallway, the floors appear to rise, the ceiling appears to sink, and the walls appear to narrow into a point at the center of the observer's view. Of course, the dimensions of the hallway remain constant for its entire length, and the floor does not actually rise. Okay, the ceiling does not actually sink, nor do the walls actually close in. It is perspective, and it's the human eye. Everything is perceived this way. Similarly, when the sun, the moon, airplanes, or clouds appear to sink towards the horizon as they move away from us, they're not actually losing altitude and slowly approaching sea level. They are, in fact, maintaining the same altitude, except they are moving away from you. And so the law of perspective makes them appear to sink. And we'll pause it there for today. We're 40 minutes in. Again, I want to thank everyone for the emails. They are greatly appreciated. If you'd like to have your thoughts heard to the masses, it's the Flat Earth Files at gmail.com. Again, it is the Flat Earth Files at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We welcome all perspectives. We are all trying to navigate through a sea of lies, and that is the honest to goodness truth. And together, if we put all our little differences aside, I truly believe that we'll come out victorious. So again, thank you for all the kind words. Continue the good fight, my friends. And I hope to hear from you very soon. God bless each and every one of you. Until the next episode of the Flat Earth Files, you keep your head on a swivel. And until next time, my friends, we'll see you.
You're listening to the Fact Hunter Radio Network.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Hey, hon, we really need new phones.
T-Mobile will cover the cost of 4 amazing new iPhone 15s, and each line is only $25 a month.
New iPhone 15s? Best new year ever.
Get 4 iPhone 15s on us with eligible trade-in when you switch to T-Mobile.
Minimum of 4 lines for $25 per line per month with autopay discount using debit or bank account. $5 more per line without autopay, plus taxes and fees. Phone fee at 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers. Contact us before canceling account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. $35 per line connection charge applies. See T-Mobile.com.
Hey, hon, we really need new phones.
T-Mobile will cover the cost of 4 amazing new iPhone 15s, and each line is only $25 a month.
New iPhone 15s? Best new year ever.
Get 4 iPhone 15s on us with eligible trade-in when you switch to T-Mobile.
Minimum of 4 lines for $25 per line per month with autopay discount using debit or bank account. $5 more per line without autopay, plus taxes and fees. Phone fee at 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers. Contact us before canceling account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. $35 per line connection charge applies. See T-Mobile.com.